Hello there, we are on chapter 11, Adopting Older Children. So, although the issues for adoptees are the same regardless of what age they are relinquished and adopted, there are some things to consider when adopting older children. For instance, problems arise from the numerous attachments and separations which occur when children are shuttled from one foster home to another. In addition to attachment problems, adoptive parents of older children may face abuse inflicted either by members of their family of origin or by their foster family or both. These traumas place a great deal of responsibility upon the adoptive parents for understanding, compassion, and restraint in dealing with difficult behavior. 1 year of love. Parents who adopt older children are often told such things as 1 year of love for each year of abuse, are led to believe that if they can just love enough, these children will be fine. Oh boy, I've heard this one. Of course, they never can, because children don't trust anyone or anything. Why should they? Although these children have essentially the same issues as those children adopted at birth, the parents have been exasperated by repeated disappointments. The problems have been exasperated by repeated disappointments and failed attachments. They are not going to be foolish enough to trust this relationship. Adoptive parents of abused children should be told by the social workers just how difficult their job is going to be. They have to be extremely understanding, strong, and resilient. People who adopt older children are often people who already have children, but who feel as if they wanted to help the unwanted child. By the way, I put that in quotes even though she didn't, but just because they are in foster care does not mean that they are unwanted. Okay, just remember there are issues in the foster care system I will be covering that are problematic. So that doesn't mean that they're unwanted. Let's be clear about that. The child often completely disrupts the family and disappoints the parents, who had some fantasy about them and their ability to help them. And they certainly can help them, but they have to pay attention to their signals. The issue of touch. I mentioned earlier that touch is very important to any child, or even an adult. For an adoptee who was adopted as a child rather than as an infant, however, touch can be traumatic. Some of these children have been physically and/or sexually abused, and touch represents abuse. Telling the child that they don't have to worry about being abused in the present family does not help. I won't hurt you, I just want to love you, are words many abusers use to seduce the child. Excuse me. Parents of these children should take their cues from the child and proceed very slowly. The child needs to protect themselves against further abuse and loss. Fear of connection. It is, in fact, a good idea to take all things slowly with older adoptees. There may have been several attachments and separations in the life of the child which make each subsequent attachment more suspect. Wariness and suspicion will be evident in most cases, even as one detects a real wish on the part of the child to be able to trust that this will be a family with whom the adoptee can connect for good. The wish does not translate into trust, no matter how much the parents try to convince the child that they're not going to abandon them. They will expect it to happen, and it is their experience. It is going to be very difficult for them to even begin to trust. Parents must understand this and not personalize the child's rejections of their efforts. The child is simply defending themselves against being hurt again. Rejection is a hair trigger for adoptees, especially those who have suffered several broken attachments. So adoptive parents should not expect miracles. They need to stay calm, even if their child is not. These kids can be very provocative and get parents hooked into their system. Many parents of older adopted children, even if they don't want to admit it, have some kind of missionary zeal involved in these adoptions and are surprised, disappointed, and angry when the child is not grateful for their good intentions. Not only are many of these children not grateful, but they are angry, suspicious, and hostile. Such feelings are normal for children who have been in foster care, especially those who have been abused. It doesn't matter that the adoptive parents have no intention of abusing them. They don't know that. They were probably taken out of an abusive biological home, not necessarily, but could be, and put into foster care system, which may have been abusive. They have absolutely no reason to trust their new situation and won't for a long, long time, if ever. To those parents, I want to say this. If the child treats you as if you were the abusers or potential abusers, let them know that you are understanding of their fears and that you understand that they cannot trust you yet. Tell them to take their time and let you know if you are doing anything that seems threatening to them. They need to feel as if some kind of control over what happens to them. It is essential that abused children, especially if they are sexually abused, get professional help. Both you and the child need and deserve this help. Meanwhile, don't try to defend yourselves against any accusations they may make against you. Just say that you understand why they might feel this way, and that you know that they will just have to find out for themselves if their feelings are valid for you. Remember that adoptees project onto adoptive parents much of what happened to them before and many of the feelings that they make themselves have inside. Arguing with about this does no good. Acknowledging the feelings do. Being empathetic. An adoptee who has been in several foster homes is not going to accept their new family as their family right away. They have been disappointed too many times before. The new family should practice a little at a time to be a family. Do things that are fun, exciting, and silly. Then allow the time for the child to integrate the experience. Have empathy with their past without being intrusive. Listen without judgment. Validate feelings and try to understand the helplessness and sorrow they feel. They will probably not be able to communicate their feelings overtly, and parents should try to become acquainted with their symbolic expressions of love and loss. Remember that they have suffered multiple losses and is grieving. They want to be able to trust your love, but they cannot, so be patient. One of the things you may notice as parents of older adopted children is that the child may regress to a younger age at first, and periodically thereafter. This is normal. They have to grow up in the experience with you. They may even wet the bed, which may be a combination of regression and anxiety. It could also be what do you call it? It could be a symptom of sexual abuse as well, that there was something going on, and it's very common for adoptees and or sexually abused victims to do that, continuing on into as they're older. So just be aware that could be something that's going on. Anywho, don't punish them for it. Just let them know that it must be tough to be in yet another home and that you know it will take some time for them to adjust. Let them act like a 2-year-old if they feel like it. Just be understanding as you can. Understanding, patience, and acknowledgement of feelings are essential in parenting older adoptive children. If you begin feeling rejected by them, let this act out as a hint to how he must be feeling on the inside, although 100 times more strongly. And no matter how much they act out, it makes you feel bad. You are the adult, and you are the parent, and you must be the ones to remain in control of your reactions to your emotions. This is not easy, as many of you know, or will find out to know. If you find that you cannot do so, get help. Don't try to be a matriarch. If they act out on their feelings overtly, this will be the ultimate test, and you have to be ready for it. They want, and they also need, security, boundaries, and limits in order to feel safe. But they will fight you about themselves until you feel like giving up. Don't. They are rebelling against your control because they feel the need to be in control. At the same time, they know that they aren't. Parents need to be strong and, above all, fair. So yes, you can also give them some control. Obviously, we need control, not only because we're adopted, but just because every child deserves some control in their life. But understand that there needs to be boundaries and limits to it. Especially being adopted, like, it needs to be clear, and it needs to be fair. If there's going to be, I don't want to say punishment, but if there needs to be some sort of punishment, like a timeout, even for older children, what will that be? It has to reflect what the action was or what they did wrong. You can't just, like, no punishment, or not no punishment. You can't just be like, just go to your room. That's not going to work. How is that punishment? Hey, let's take a time out. Let's think about what happened. What can we do better? What do you think is fair in what you did is wrong? So, for example, if they, I'm trying to throw out an idea. If they stayed up late and didn't do their homework, for example, maybe taking away, TV time until their homework is done would be an appropriate punishment, right? That would be something that you could do. You're not saying no TV at all. You're just saying this needs to get done first, and then you can have TV. Or maybe limit the amount of TV. Maybe set a bedtime, okay, well, if this is clearly not working, we need to get something done and get to the bottom of it. That is the point. Anyway, no matter how much they rebel against it, limits are extremely important to adoptees, especially those who have been moved around a great deal. They thrive on routine and consistency. This gives them a sense of security. Often in their various homes, they have been given mixed messages. So they need to know that what one says is what one means. And if the verbal message must be consistent with the body language and the facial expressions. Children are not fooled by words which do not match the unconscious expressions of whoever is communicating with them. Yeah, as adoptive children, we can definitely read people a little bit better overall, because we can read through the intentions. I can tell you, there are times when someone is talking and I can just read their intention, and I can just expect certain things from them, because that's what we're known, like, we can expect things from people, right? It's just, it plays out every time, and so we learn to just read that. Anyway, moving on. Difficulties in school. It would be unfair to think that kids who have been shuffled around will do well in school. They are full of anxiety, which preludes their being able to concentrate for very long. Help them do their best, but lower your expectations. Many of these children are taking in a great deal more information than they are able to put out in the forms of tests or homework. Schools are very limited in the methods they have for assessing children's learning capacities, intellectual and/or creative functions, or acquired knowledge. Just because your child is not functioning well in school does not mean that they are not intelligent and not learning. So I agree with this. This is why I homeschool, actually. And I personally, this is, again, this is how I parent. If I was taking in an older child, not that I would ever adopt, but even in foster care, if I was allowed to homeschool, knowing that that was what is the best interest of the child and that they needed, that is something that I would offer and do, and obviously it would be expected of, whatever the foster care thing is. Now, if you're adopting, you have control over that, but something that I would still ask the child, because you can totally get creative with their learning. So, for example, with my little guy, And you guys can follow me on my other channel. It's called Homeschooling in New York. Um, but we do things like today we were doing art and music, so we watched Peter Pan with Kathy Rigby, and then we watched a little bit of Peter Pan the animated movie, and then we watched a little bit of Peter Pan the 2003 movie. We compared all three, so he had seen the other two, so don't think that we didn't compare them. We talked about the sets, how the characters were, the music. And then we also looked at how plays were put on, and like different costuming and set designs and all of this different stuff. I mean, we went through a lot in a short time. And now he's doing art on his own, actually. He's coloring and watching stuff. But he's still learning. It's still something that he's learning, and we're having fun with it. They're not going to do that in a public school, and it takes a shorter time, and it works for us. Anyway. It is important for everyone involved in the education of these children to understand that the reason these children have so much trouble is experimental, not biological. Children who feel abandoned fear abandonment, and keeping this from happening again takes energy and concentration away from academic pursuits. Children who suffer from fetal alcohol syndrome may have even more difficulty than children whose birth mothers did not have substance abuse problems. However, any version of that bad seed or defective gene pool theory as an explanation for adopted children's academic problems is nonsensical. That the whole theory is right out of the Dark Ages and deserves to be buried once and for all. The expectations which many adoptive parents have for their children's academic standing may never be realized because their child's anxiety and inability to concentrate. Putting more pressure on them will only exacerbate the problem, filling them with even more anxiety. When a child's primary activity becomes protecting themselves from further abandonment, it leaves little energy for concentrating on other less life-threatening activities such as schoolwork. To get an idea of what this hypervigilance is like, watch a bird pecking in the garden. Notice how the bird is constantly lifting up its head and looking all around for signs of danger. This is what it is like for the adoptee. Even though they may not be consciously aware of what they are doing, they are constantly on the alert for signs of possible rejection, the potential for abandonment. Many adoptees are easily distracted and do not seem to be paying attention in class, and daydreaming, and many teachers complain about this altered state of consciousness, often associated with trauma victims, which these kids are. Because of concentration problems, adoptees have a great deal of trouble finishing assignments and with testing. Many are classified as learning disabled and suffer from attention deficit disorder, ADD. Also, adoptees are at a higher rate of being considered special needs or neurodivergent, like sensory processing disorder, autistic, ADHD, having attachment disorders like RAD or dissociative identity disorder, things like that. So it's very true that this happens. And schools are not equipped for this. Like, I can go on about the school situation. It's not just an adoptee thing, but schools are just most definitely not equipped for this. There are many things that schools do that adoptees get hurt from, and they're not trained. These teachers are not trained. I don't think they should have to be trained specifically, but they should be aware of certain things in general to look out for. But yeah, that is something that I can totally go off of. Anyway, expectations should be kept reasonable and flexible. Although all children should be encouraged to do their homework and to do their best in school. There may be times when lowering the child's anxiety level would be more important than doing their homework. Yes, this is difficult to get across to parents who may be measuring their own worth through their child's school performance. Yes, your child's performance, your child's goals and accomplishments are not yours, and they have to set them for themselves. You cannot set them for your child. You cannot live through your child. Let me be clear on that. If they don't want to do something because you expect them to do it, that is okay. They are not here because, let me put it to you this way. Children are alive because we as adults were selfish and wanted children, or we physically had them. Whether they're biological or not, they are alive, right? Let's put it that way. We cannot demand that they be a doctor if they don't want to be a doctor. It's not going to go well, right? I'm just giving you an example. Let them be themselves, and when you see them happy, you will be happy. Trust me on this. Anyway, moving on. The teacher's responsibilities. Oh, we are going over this. Okie dokie then. The teacher's responsibilities. Perhaps one day someone will devise a means to reach these young students through different ways of teaching and testing, so their anxiety will not paralyze them, and their intellectual potential will be realized. Meanwhile, it would be helpful if teachers would not send these children from the room for behavioral or inattention problems. Oh, yep, that happens. Yep. This is a form of rejection and abandonment and only serves to raise the anxiety level and to reinforce their belief in themselves as defective, bad persons. When a child behaves inappropriately, one effective practice is to put one's hand on the child's shoulder and say something to the effect, "You seem to be having a difficult time, Johnny. Why don't you just put your head down, or get a drink of water, or sit in the rocking chair?" Rocking chairs are great soothers for anxious children. Also, newer information, but sensory rooms or sensory areas are great too, no matter the age. It does help. Until you feel better and are able to get on with your work. The simple acknowledgement of the child's feelings rather than a criticism of their behavior has a calming and positive effect on them. Even if they have to be isolated in the room, it is better than sending them out of the room, which equals rejecting them. Teachers should evaluate the importance of their assignments. Is all homework really necessary, or is much of it busy work? It is important to be honest and give anxious children only as much work as they can handle. Discussing the biological family. Adopting an older child often means that the child has some memory of their biological family. They may have been taken from them because of abuse or neglect. Talking about the biological parents becomes a sensitive issue. Although it makes no sense to such a child to say that their mother really loved them when they probably remember the abuse, neither is it right to make a disparaging remarks about any child's biological parents, no matter what the circumstances of the separation. The child needs to express their anger about what happened to them, but the adoptive parents should acknowledge the child's feelings without voicing their own. So yeah, don't demonize the first parents. It's very bad. We all like to be able to complain about our families, but we don't like to hear anyone else doing so. Bingo. Yep. Only we can demonize them ourselves. Anyway. Sorry. Sometimes, rather than talking about their anger, the child will act it out with the adoptive parents, especially the mother. This form of getting the anger out can be quite abusive to the adoptive parent. Yet, some of it has to be tolerated. One has to be more flexible about the rules for speech and behavior when one adopts abused children, because of the anger abuse engenders. Allows the child to express their anger verbally, which often means swearing. Swearing is only words. Try not to get too defensive when the swearing is directed at you. Don't say, "Why are you yelling at me? I'm the one who took you in when your parents were abusing you." As I said before, these children will not ask for their lives to be manipulated in this way, and they have no reason to be grateful for it. Empathize with the feelings and try to direct their reactions to the feelings to more appropriate means of expression. Getting a punching bag or trampoline and try to get your child to use them when things are getting out of control. Sometimes verbalizing the feelings is not going to be enough. These children are enraged, not just angry, and part of their rage comes from having been taken away from their parents, no matter how abusive the situation was. Remember the quotation from Judith Vorst earlier in the book? In the child's eyes, taking them from their parents, even from an abusive situation, may seem even more abusive to them than staying with them. Any adopting couple needs to look at their attitudes towards the birth mother and father if he is known, as well as towards the genetic inheritance of the child. Genes do not count in determining the personality of the child, but adopted children have no better or worse genes than anyone else. What they do have is a deep, difficult to heal wound, which is a result of devastating experience, which takes a great deal of patience and understanding to help heal. The wounded parents. Sometimes helping their children to heal their wounds becomes difficult for the adoptive parents because the process of the children's communicating pain by acting out the chaos and anger they feel inside, the parents themselves become wounded. What often happens is that they begin to respond to their own feelings of being rejected, inadequate, and unappreciated. They feel inadequate as parents and angry about their apparent ineffectiveness, often taking out their frustrations on the child. This sets up a circle pattern, of rejecting behavior on the part of both parents and the child. This all too often culminates during adolescence and the child being kicked out of the home, placed in psychiatric centers, or leaving of their own volition. Any of these scenarios leaves everyone feeling rejected and like a failure. Adoptive parents need not assume that they are ineffective parents just because the child is acting out. As was stated before, the child is usually responding to what happened before they entered the adoptive family. However, the child's early trauma should not be used as an excuse for the couple to avoid exploring what is going on in their marriage or in their relationship with the child. Effective communication between couples is one of oft-cited deficits in a relationship, and the issues brought about by the introduction of an adopted child into the relationship will often exacerbate an already established problem. Their job is a difficult one, and a good relationship between them is essential for the well-being of the marriage and the child. What they have taken on is a parenting plus. Healing the adoptive parents. As difficult as it is to do because the demands made upon them by the adoptee, the adoptive parents would do well to take a good emotional care of themselves and their non-adopted children. In addition to caring for the adoptee, it might help to keep in mind that they can only help them heal. They can't take away the pain nor eliminate their past experience. The child will need to work the pain through for themselves. Adult adoptees who are reading this book might be surprised to know that their parents need to heal too. Yeah, we're not actually surprised. I will say we also agree a lot with this book. It is very validating, to say the least. I will just say that, but let's continue on. There are ways in which an adult adoptee can heal the wounds of their parents as well as those of their siblings. The most important thing to do is first recognize and then to withdraw any projections they may have toward their adoptive parents, and to see them as they really are, people with feelings and problems of their own. They can begin by checking out not only the true nature of their expectations their parents had for them, but how they felt about a multitude of things concerning them as they were growing up. They may find out that their perceptions were right, or might be surprised to learn that they were wrong. In any case, they will have taken the first step towards some kind of reconciliation and a new way to relate to their adoptive parents. I don't know how I feel about that. That kind of makes me feel iffy. I feel like it's on the parents to do it because the child, the adoptee, had no choice. And it should be the parents taking a deep look in and listening to what the child has to say, or the adult adoptee, really, and doing work on themselves, because there's just a lot there. Anyway, the parents should examine not only their experiences for their child, but those they have for themselves as well, and find ways in which to reward themselves as good parents. Their job is a difficult one. This is especially true for the parents of children who were abused and those who act out. The mother especially is under tremendous pressure to prove over and over again her commitment to her child and her performance in their life. It is difficult to imagine how outrageous the provocations and demands can get, and only an adoptive mother who has lived through it can know what it's like. It generates a great deal of pain for her, and her feelings toward her child are often confusing. She should know that her feelings are normal. She does not always have to feel love for her child. She does need support, education, and counseling. She also, adding in, needs to listen to how adult adoptees feel and are expressing that, and not completely block us out. Because guess what? Young adoptees grow up to be adult adoptees and may or may not speak out on how they feel. And if they really cared, they would listen. Because, continuing on. She needs to get into groups to feel less isolated. She needs time for herself. She needs to know that she is not a failure and that she is making a difference in her child's life. The only difference she would make is if she actually listened and gave a damn. The unfortunate thing is most of these adoptive parents won't, because they will then find out that the child is anti-adoption, and they don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that it's trauma on the child, because they don't want trauma for the child. No one does, and I get it, but the reality is that is something that we go through, and if they actually gave a damn, and yes, I'm saying this out loud, they would take the time to listen to these books and read and research and get the healing that they and the child need, and that's not happening in most cases, and that's a problem, a big problem. Anyway, taking care of the biological children. Sometimes parents who adopt older children already have children of their own. For those biological children, living with an adopted sibling, especially if they are acting out, is often experienced as living with a handicapped child who requires 90% of the attention, leaving them feeling less important. They are often expected to accommodate the adopted sibling because they did not have the advantage of being born into the family. Although not necessarily wanting to relate to their mother in the same way the adopted sibling is relating to her, these children are often sometimes jealous of the intensity of the relationship between the adopted sibling and their mother. There is frequently a concomitant of feeling of guilty on the part of the biological children of not having been adopted. A great deal of overcompensation goes on to make up for this, which in my opinion does not work to the advantage of either the adoptee or the other children. Much of the family dynamics seem unavoidable. However, because of the need of the adopted child to be constant control of their environment, they feel the need is a matter of life or death, and the rest of the family often feels as if they were killing them. God. A word about fathers. Because most adoptees have never known their fathers, the major portion of my discussion has been directed towards the child's relationship with their mothers, biological and adoptive. if the it was the mother to whom the child was attached and probably bonded before birth, and a mother with whom most adopted children tend to work out their trauma of the severed bond. In the case of older children, however, the father may have been part of that child's life. The quality of that relationship will help determine the level of trust a child will subsequently have in their adoptive father. If the biological father-child relationship was an abusive one, there may be ambivalent feelings towards the adoptive father as the available target for feelings of anger, disappointment, and fear. Even if there was no abuse, feelings about having been separated from their biological family may make the adoptive father's role more immediate and more problematic than would be the case had the child been adopted at birth. But fathers are not only important in the lives of the older adoptees, they are important in the lives of all children. And I am of the opinion that when a woman considers having a child, whether biological or adopted, without the presence of a father or a male role model in their lives, the child will be at a disadvantage. As far as the child is concerned, mothers and fathers are not interchangeable. The child needs both parents. A father has an important role in the life of their child, but it is a different role from that of the mother. And their real importance comes later in the child's life than that of the mother. There comes a time in the life of every child when it is appropriate to move away from the mother in a bit in order to establish the other emotional bonds. A father may be the best person to facilitate this. If a child doesn't move away from the mother in the safety of the relationship with the father, the child may end up enmeshed with her. The mother may begin to use the child as the whole focus for her emotional life. This is too big of a burden for any child, and a father can help make sure this doesn't happen. He can begin by the time the child is 2 years old to spend time alone with the child away from home. A father can teach things which the mother cannot. He can bring to the family a different dynamic from that of the mother. A father's influence on their lives of the children and their relationship with them will be different from those of the mother, and will have a different impact on the boys from that on the girls. Whether we like it or not, whether it is the result of hormones or environment, men and women, boys and girls are different from one another. Anyone who doubts this should read Deborah Tannen's wonderful book, You Just Don't Understand. These differences are evident from a very young age and need not to seem as problematic. Okay, a chip off the old block. In counseling individuals and families, it has become apparent to me that most children feel pressure to live up to some preconceived expectations coming from the father than from the mother. Mothers are more apt to be seen as giving unconditional love than fathers whose approval many people feel they have never attained. Fathers of adopted children who have no biological connections and therefore lack similar inherited traits must be especially careful to avoid any expectation that their children will follow in their footsteps or live out their unfulfilled dreams. Of course, this is true of any father of any child, but more true in adoptive families. Adopted children are already very good at living the false self. In any attempt to mold them into the father's image of what they should be like will only serve to bury deeper the true self and feed the fuel of accompanying conscious or unconscious rage. Fathers, therefore, can help their children tremendously by encouraging and fostering their children's own innate interests and talents, which can often be observed in play and other activities of young children. Father's support for the mother. Because the mother is still the one who does most of the nurturing in a family, she is the one who has the most contact with the children. In an adoptive family, the mother often feels the most criticized because the child most often feels that the mother was the abandoner. All the subsequent feelings of abandonment, therefore, must be worked out with the mother figure. The father's support of the mother becomes very important. Yet, many adoptive mothers say that their husbands do not give this support because he is not having the same trouble with the child that she is. He is often critical of her, accusing her of provoking the confrontations which occur between her and the child. This gives the child more fuel for further insubordination and triangulates the family with the father, the child forming an alliance against the mother. If the father could begin to understand the true nature of the conflict between his wife and the child and offer support to her, the bond between the two of them would become stronger, which would benefit the whole family. Adoptive parents do make a difference. Adoptive parents have a great responsibility and a unique relationship to their adopted child or children. Despite the trials and tribulations which can occur in these families, they can and do make a difference in their lives of children, who might otherwise be kept in situations which are detrimental to them. They can and must help to heal the wounds of their child, but they must also help one another to heal their own wounds. Their roles are often misunderstood, and the expectations placed upon them overwhelming, especially those parents who take on the enormous responsibility of adopting older children. It would be helpful for them to form groups to gain support from people who have had or are having similar experiences, and to help them overcome their feelings of isolation. Adopting any child who has experienced the trauma of separation from their biological family is a challenge, but when one adds to that emotional scarring of children who have experienced multiple separations and traumas, the challenge often seems overwhelming. These children need an enormous amount of patience, care, and understanding, and a lowering of expectations about their own response to that love and care. Meanwhile, society can help by having a more realistic attitude towards adoption in all its myriad aspects.